Page 3, Praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Datta, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When supreme amongst humans you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower road, the one path, the sublime reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts. To you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 every devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms aspects. With supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the 4 faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. To page 15, to the Heart of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Lotus Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perfection. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. The same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisoha. Shariputra, the bodhisattva mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the bodhisattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadeviputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. To page 25 for the short mandala. Sashi pogi jukshi meto tram, rirabling shin indi genpadi, sange shindu mite uwagi, drogonanda jin la jopasho, jetsa lama dampe kanamki, joku kala gensi trindene, jeta sampel duche zinmala, zapke choki chapa babtu so, idam guru ratna mandala kamniriyatayami. Sanje Jadan Saji Janana Janjo Bado Danhin Jazanje Dagi Shijin Jive Sananje Dola Venji Sanje Dovarash Sanje Jadan Saji Janana Janjo Bado Dani Jazan Dagi Shijin Jive Sananje Dola Venji Sanje Dovarash Sanje Jadan Saji Janana Janjo Bado Dani Jazanje Dagi Shijin Jive Sana La Benje Sanje Dovrai Sho Penzo Dele Chevi Tumegu Tayo Due Ro Gomes Malaji Jajin Deve Shaje Zo De La Kujanze Donyin Juzun De Jubela Shiji Sinze Kanje Dendro Chana Bama Dende Jazala So De So Shin De Lundo Sho Bande De La Marambaje Dagi Ningara Bende De Shona Bande Jeme Kone Jazon De Kuzon Do Yungu Do De De Zos Awa Dang Zo Gulong Chanju Tanda Di Lamrim Chu Han Shea Ki Chu Di Da Lamrim Chanju Lamrim Re Rwa Lamrim Sonza Ane Gulong Ki Chane Chu Kawa Dugui Me Gulong La Rale Ki Yuinza Gulong Chanju Sim Gulong Ya Woch Rwa Nge Tiring Chu Nya Toya Samya Di Ye Sangma Ni Shenbyen Duya Chi Du Yis Ni Shenbyen Duya La Sanje Yukuma To Du Tiye Chide Sanje Yukuma Toba La Sanje Yukuma Nyamle Chu Nyamle Chu Wala Nyamle Shewa La Toya Tiye Chi Du Nge Tugu Yu Tinje Ni Gulong Wa Tinje Sam Dan Shos
We need to assume a correct intention before listening to the Lambrim, before meditating. So therefore, one has to have that correct intention of altruism, of bodhicitta, thinking that today I'm going to hear and reflect on the Lamrim, which essentially is to do with the concern for others' welfare, the benefiting intention, with a view to bringing all beings to the state of Buddhahood. And practicing at that. And in order to practice that path, you need to know it. In order to know it, you need to hear it. So think that I'm going to hear and reflect on this Lamrim in order to benefit all beings.
Ai, tá. Có cũng rồi, nó là milieu de lên, ni chơi de gì chơi cái chung thì ngon nè. Kéo sang bùi, yak bè kéo sang bùi, thì có cũng rồi.
Now we should rejoice, thinking that we have a basic human support and we can listen to Dharma with that. How fortunate, how wonderful opportunity.
아야. 다 기생 이 참도. 디지 잡을 기회 기보이 견디 되면 견디 되면 담바초. 유승지 람지 좀 이 이름에 전도 시시 유에스로. 다 잡을 기회 기보 아니 다저 다 덤베다고 다자 덤바샤 유튜브 고몰로도 당 조지 반대 아디샤라 소가다 아니 대당 아니 하버드 이 간지인기 개바 대다게 아니 겐데 투메 템베 담베 초 담바스도 맹하게 촉도 가래 라위나 기부숨 질람지는 바들에 에스로 세상 당아 세기도 한테 유명한도 당아 냠네 당아 원에 대다 기부숨 질람지는 바들에 세상 딜레야 네 이름에 전대 수시 예스 딜레야다 심팅네 가원 마신이게 네 남주의 덴바지 이나 딜레야 가와지 그레스 단 남주의 메디니 지기 아디 하고 말해서 거다
Yeah. Where we left off on page 4, it is the verse second but from the bottom one. So therefore, this supreme instruction is relied on by many fortunate ones, the wise beings of India and Tibet. What analytical person would not be captivated by the stages of the path of the three types of beings? Here, what is being brought forth is the fortune, the great fortune one has, that in terms of the instruction that has come down from the lineage of Buddha Shakyamuni through Nagarjuna and Atisha, and then latterly all of the great masters of Tibet, when it talks about in the first line, Dhamma, meaning the supreme instruction, this is the best of instruction. Why? Because this supreme instruction has within it the instructions for the three types of beings, the beings of the three types of capacity. So if one is having intelligent, discriminating wisdom, one would understand that, realize that, and have a heartfelt joy in that. Without that type of wisdom that discriminates and is intelligent, one would not see that. One would not have such joy.
다 기생은 기우충으로 왔다 도스래. 산제기 최 남바 산제외 최 냠내신이 간산데라 대전 숨체고다. 독산다나야고 요래. 남게 최대 수송을 했으나 고주세대 dom바점내데 송을 해. 간성야기 최대다 그 개겐된다네 시시 산제기 살도난 글람지림 바들에. 다들 냠내신이 이제 대전 그들라 안에 간산 컨데여서는 간산 대전 숨요래서 어디 시기요다.
Now, it's very good if we understand in the context of the Buddha Dharma what these three capabilities or capacities of practitioner are. We know that the source of the doctrine, the teaching is Buddha Shakyamuni, and that the doctrine is laid out in terms of the practice right from the beginning of how to rely correctly on the spiritual friend, right up to the stages of complete and perfect Buddhahood enlightenment. But then within that, the actual people who practice that are of three capacities.
다 기부충은 단다디 기생내 시에서 겨와치마 녀송 동일의 지시다네 겨와치마 원도 함이고마 더비하게 치두 애네 람냠네 진이 저 점로 치야다 아니 직진바 땅야 수dim송야라 소가다 미기 주공 그 수dim송야라 소가 대다 냠네 진이게 As
we mentioned last week, we defined the lower capacity practitioner as being one who, with a view, with a goal of again securing a good birth as a human or God in the future lives, with that in mind, takes refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha and engages in the practices of ethics, generosity, and so forth, particularly in ethics, abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, practicing the 10 virtues, and goes for that goal out of a trepidation for unfortunate rebirth.
Tundula Jawlena Digumendo, Milli Jawlen, Techi Duke Church. The me Jawlen by Yena, that let Hata Pashash, the long as the Tungu Marwa. Cantoya Yotan, Susan Yungu, Nara Miro, Tassus Miro, around Miro. And me, Ludos Tawine, Dumiros Janya Redor. Bad G. Dumiros, in your chick. That does a joke, there's Yalero Yermish. Kashe Lula Dunge, Kashe Simla Dunge, Kashe Lusimingala Dunge, Ra Peje, Dal Lula Dunge Mena, Simla Dunge, Simla Dunge Mena, Lula Dunge,
yes,
and the Kashe and Ningadu, the Aramade Baro.
Yes.
Chazane de that Kashe Nal Kemet and I general tell the Lamsan true order. Those that do around the such, just me Ludin, that Dungero was Janja. Redwa, Dungi, Doji, Kangero, Janja Resha. Adela chose Mindu, somewhere what another, Dungit, Joachima Mil Gomata and Nanga, Dungaji Tovashos in Yusustosta. They chose came into Dele Tarvaji, Yuna Menasta, Dele Tarvaji, Yuna Menasta, some of the Tango Yoro. That dish into Nambosanjeve, and the Churgi, Toadi, the Niangore. Sive dele capture singba.
Yeah.
Sive dewala capture. Tandanga mi dewa di sive dewara tela capture sing. Tigbele togdanista. Sive dewala ane capture. Digbele migyo. Ta migyo chu ponya. Jacheza koala tawa tini kanzandela. Kiu things resta. Jeza ko mi lude. Yawadile tarwaji yuna, Kowadile tarwaji yuna, Titundini Gudu, some down. A teacher do any jamruchia dang, and so Miguju to Dingilam, that Dinshigi, Yamlin, so Tanang Sanjeve, Chogi Gozuk so the Netsukuerda.
So then, in terms of that, then we are trying to go for a future life, a future rebirth as a human. That's a given. Of course, we wouldn't want to be born as, have aspiration to be born as a long life God. But let's leave that for the minute. We don't want to be an animal, and the God realms, we can't see them at the current juncture, because we're humans. But if we look at it, even within the constraint of being humans, we go through difficulties. Well, some humans suffer more, some suffer less. Think about it. There is a body and a mind. Some suffer physically, some suffer mentally. Some suffer having both, isn't it? So some people are experiencing both types of physical and mental problems and sufferings. That's just the nature of even being in the human existence. It seems that we can't be free of that suffering. Even if you have this kind of attitude, I'm doing okay and I don't care, somehow that changes and conditions come, and then one ends up having that suffering situation. So what's being said is that we have to take a future birth, and it's almost at this stage we don't have a choice in the matter. It is a given that the satisfaction will be there in the future life. So then, with that in mind, the question comes: is the liberated state possible or not? In the context of the Buddha Dharma, is that state of liberation possible? So then we start to look at the median scope of capacity, where you're wanting to go for a type of protection or freedom from what are called these tainted sufferings of the desire realm of cyclic existence. The well-being that we think that was in cyclic existence, we need to go beyond that to the state of liberation. So how are we going to do that initially? Well, it's a basis, it's a bottom line that we need to protect against doing the 10 non-virtues and cultivate the 10 virtues. That is there, but we need to think once more about this state. Is the state of liberation possible or not? So then we need to get a kind of sense of a taste or a going for that liberation. And we do that by understanding that the cyclic existence is unsatisfactory. And really, when we understand the mode to reverse the cyclic existence and be liberated, it comes down to understanding refuge within Buddha Dharma as a base constraint, as we already mentioned, abiding by the 10 virtues, abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, and practicing the Four Noble Truths, Dembarshi.
다 지부 딩게 찬다라고 하지 라비나 라니 코웨 등에 타베치도 네 타바 텐드니제 대치도 네 잠루치에다 딘시 냠네치에다 미게 주분 거 지름 소야라 소와테다게 냠네치니지 간산텔라 네 교딩스 거다.
Now, how would we then essentially define a middle capacity practitioner's goal? It is one who is desirous of liberation, the liberated state for him or herself alone. And with that goal in mind, they're going to understand the validity of the refuge objects. And then over and above that, practice the Four Truths and at a base level, abstain from the 10 non-virtues. Such an aspirant is of middle capacity practitioner.
다디 컨데스 용고를 라디오 때 나랑도 수수삼단이래와 나랑도 미르된데라 깨와단 나와단 집에 동에 깨가나지 동에 되제디 도야요 말다 깨와들렌 신제라 로 제디 제베 다 동에 요르와 나자 쉬부지 요르와 강에 쉬부지 요르와 다 진주강라 안에 치기 롱도 체마수고 나시 사단 조단 마신이와 죽어도나 누제 가가가 스케 부치 누야미시지 죽어도도세 랍신겨 말이와 부고 진주가나 가 죽어도도스 라고야 무구였다 아니 파마 장고여나 야면나 죽어도래 야면나 진바다여래 야면나 직지여세제 아니 파메 강에 되세요다 파마 가시 하마고 탄데 부근니다 다니가 나 카좀세 제가 기회 동에 할래와 독자래 근데 다 개외 동에니 가서 야야야 로게인데 나랑 띵사 미드서 로랍 두고면도 나 로디젤레스디 로카제요스디 라구면도 데 가르스나 개외 동에요래 셈나라 람니 두고요 말 기부요 말아와디 개외 동에에 따라와디 로랍데 로카제레스데 로랍 두고면도 와 아니 나와니 다 가져도다 다 띵사 두 마이베 겐르와다 학과도 딩산 제조만 나자 망보 쉬우지다 나래 학외 나자 독자들의 망보 쉬우지 죄다 매외 나자 다 제를 된바 와 딩산 케미컬 소란 제기 수부축제 지중어축 난그 수부상마축 다 죄다스게 요 말했다 칼라사엘레 칼라레 시나시용아저로 오늘에는 칼라사야데 수부초야로 다 칼라기 수부 매버 수고요데 싱기레 탑시요 말다 제 뇽아라고 뇽여제다 수고는 총아총으로 뇽여제 아니 두세제다 나외 동에니 쉬어지도 다 집에 동에니 수직 도사요 말데 제가 나지 동에 되제데 독다요 말다 수직로 독다요 말데 단다 말한저로 잡지 대대 위너다다 다 디도 디 매버서야게 탑랑 위에데 매서 삼로제 땅 tum나야고 요렇게 땅 tum나네 Also dinner core jabje de era.
So then the question is, how does it work? Excuse me. The question is, how does it work? How does it work? How do we reverse this state of being in samsara? Well, as a human, we go through all of this: birth, aging, sickness, and death. And then how do we come to reverse that? Well, looking at each of them, when we're born from the mother's womb, we are just like a bundle of wind, and somehow we come out and we can't say anything directly to the parents. We can't say that we're hungry or whatever. We can just cry, and sometimes we'll just wet ourselves. So like that, without being able to say to the parents what's happened. If the parents are a bit switched on, they might pick that up. But sometimes if the parents don't know, they could get even angry and beat you about that and say, be quiet, be quiet. So all of these things start to happen. And this is just like some of these sufferings of the being born. And then the aging, what about that? Aging is something that we're going through right now. And it is somehow when someone says, oh, how old are you? You don't want to answer. Why? Because you're going through that aging process. Yeah, you're going through the aging process and you can feel a bit uncomfortable about it, even though it's happening to us and you can't return that back. Then when we got on to birth, aging, sickness, well, sickness, there are just so many conditions that can make us ill and sick. Outer conditions, inner conditions, and particularly now with all these chemicals around, slight imbalance chemically from the external chemicals, and then the internal elements get out of whack because of the external excess of chemicals. That's just on the level of external things that affect us in the environment. Well, what about the food we eat? Really, the food is meant to preserve and sustain the body, but that seems to be losing its, nourishment and vitality now. And so if our sense of immune system goes down from the food, then that can be a condition for our sickness as well, can't it? Getting that balance right on the dietary level. Now death. Death, well, that's a given. We really can't reverse that. In fact, we're all going there. Past is past. So we're getting closer to death now. So now the question comes, if all of this can be reversed, birth, aging, sickness, and death, why not look at it and try to reverse it? Apart from that, if you don't, we'll just go round and round. Call it dogada.
제가 다른도 류덴데와 류덴데 간에 중도 상당으로 와.
야.
류덴데도 상당한데 당저 파마니레 중화데 신기를. 다 뒤콘을 간데 중화를 라빈데 안에 낭백에다 레라데네 중화. 레데야 녀모 꾸네란지 녀모 마리바. 안에 데라데네 중화레스. 다 제가 콜로 규지요. 단대딩 아주 류덴데 데브레다. 데브디나 데 수수레라. 다 소니 다 방법이 군조 서버에서 이제 저거라. 낭백이 된데 말에 거의 레르되네 총어레스. 레 규조데 레레스. 레데 아니 녀모라 되네 총어레스. 제가 렌데가 남샤들 되네는 먼저 개와디 총어레스. 다 된데 말이과 때 규조 짜와디 되문데 말이과래. 말이과디 아니 로친지로. 감된 세마메 바로. 아니 갈소래 파파파 째나 타두네 갑데메바 아니 친줄로 임바 덴바메바 아니 인자 다디 덴바레면도 스타디 메우세야가 탑람 가야게 네바디 네룩심베 다메도 베셔럽 로와 다메도 베셔럽 디에도게네 메우소도도스타 닐다 다메도 원말라나 닐랑랑저 단대역이 동해 먹보지 주미지 남도 되는 연구열에 심축제로.
예.
아니 심축바디 심축바디를 때는 종아디 먼저 하고 요래. 봐. 수수 동해다 수수 마지와당 수수 강에데 예데 수수 심지 축배 왕게 아니 룽하게 차월로 걸어 쇼네 동해 요데 하고 그래. 다 심축바디 시워져야 탈람라 곰자야 돼. 곰 잡으면 되잖아. 때 지직베나 나랑 상말로 우중 곰시자고라.
야.
아니 옥종 검예 메투제 잡도 되지 세겐직 까마칭 삼발을 기부도 알아. 대내갑 될라 동해민도 와 대내갑 될라 주미지 남도 어디게 가로 요라. 주미지 남도 어디 가베 가고텔레 수술라 시버로 버시 도 알아. 디인자 다 딜야 타도 아니 다sim 친질로 버봐. 주미지 남도 싸워디 아니 다 란치 당지디 매버 차베이나다 디세베 세바지 요나다 아니 시부지 용고여다 가서다 시왕원에 되래다 단지세베 세바디 대된데 대화들 봐 저는 단다 세겐 찍니로 지대도도 왔다 디야야야야야 때문에 신제네 배추도 주주니 숨대도야 다디 단당 안 줘도야 심지 교지 유진로 제 태도야 안도 심투로다 다 딘데 많이 받체 니 배텐도 되베 되었어야 직다 낭배 시기요래로 낭배게 타왔어야 딘데 되베 되와 콜레 테베 타왔어야 직다 딘데게다 뇨모세베 세바지 시기요로 다 장기게 제가 나지 동에디 뇨모고니게 내가 갑자기 시기요다 델라 타르바스고 콜레 테베 타르바스
Okay. No. So then, as we mentioned, whether birth can be reversed, and we're coming back to this question about the reversal process, birth, aging, sickness, and death. What do we start to look at? We start to look at our bodies. Where are our bodies from? Well, our bodies are a product of the parents. And if we trace that again back further, from the Buddha Dharma point of view, we're going back to karma, that, also there's karma behind us having a body, and ignorance. And so our body is like the result of the cause of karma in that sense. Now, some people might believe that the resultant body is something made by God, isn't it, as a product of Creator or whatever. But in our case, no, very much we are a product of causality. We are the result. So when you look at your body, actually, your body is the result. Okay. So now what produced the body? The body is a product of karma and disturbing emotions. Right. So if we trace that back further, we come to see that the root of that karma and disturbing emotions is a type of unknowing mind, sometimes called ignorance, let's say unawareness. Now this erroneous consciousness, which is not a valid consciousness, engages in its object in a mistaken way. We have such a consciousness at the current juncture that misperceives the nature of the object. What is that? That's this confusion or ignorance that grasps at true existence. Now, let alone talking about non-self for the minute, just the antidote to that, what we have to cultivate is a valid wisdom consciousness, which is the direct antithesis or antidote to that, a wisdom consciousness that realizes emptiness. Why? Because we suffer. We suffer as a result of sumishigi namdo, means these thoughts we have that are projections. We extrapolate. We project things that are not there. And we can see from our own experience the way this occurs. When we hallucinate, when we have these mental thoughts, they make sufferings in our mind. It's very important to remember that the way we see things is a projection, and as a result of that we suffer. So we have to remove these projections and incorrect ways of seeing. Okay, so just to give us an example of that, we often practice breathing meditation. And what we come to find in that breathing meditation is just by practicing the breathing exercise for a few minutes, you might find that the thoughts abate for a bit and there's mental peace. What's happening here is that the mind is at rest. There is peace. Now, when we start to cultivate that peace deeper and deeper and take it further and further, then we start to get to the root of these mental constructs, these invalid thoughts of inappropriate attention, and we start to be able to remove them. Okay, so at the current juncture, we can only do it temporarily, right? And suspend those thoughts temporarily, maybe 1 or 2 seconds. But in Buddhism, we talk about a more final cessation of these mental constructs, which is called the final bliss. Now, talking about this ultimate bliss or the cessation of mental constructs is what we call liberation. And that is liberation from cyclic existence. So that liberation from cyclic existence is when you no longer have to experience uncontrolled birth, aging, sickness and death. And that is the liberation from samsara, liberation from these afflicted states.
제단데 동해세베 된지세나 녀모세 베샤베나 먼저 신이 자워제나 신참을 감도도
Yes.
신 자워디 제샤비나 자워디 제샤비나 아니 신이 양가 로마 참을 제도도
Yes.
지난시 먼저기 되자다 시단다 콘도당 더다 뒤미지 남다디게 셰모 디게 참마 아세 간진스도
Yes.
딜르디니 지고다 로
Yes.
계속 되지고다 아세야디네 아니 녜스로 ngaron지도 아니 녜락바 녜강바 아니 녜강바 아니 녜디지 아니 디시도 아니 녜빈자 아니 녜롱바직바 아니 녜밀직바 아니 녜출룩직바 녜세야디 아니 되게 아니 차단스여제로 차단스여 대왕게 마지바 용거여와디다 용거도 제가 단지 담에 또나 당지디 깨매서샤로 단지 깨매서는데 다신다디 제디 신기 자와제원나시라고 다 디매버체 당지라 삼마마다마체 아니 곰잡 요가지 요가지 스밍보도 아니 가도이네 메사 가르체비네 달 학과도 곰로 시내로 곰잡 대베네 가르체비 있는 건 냠내 망보지 당지 고야 털 삼마마다미나 아주 신 연가 푸닝체 되는 시리로
Okay.
푸닝체는 망보게 용도 지 만주 냠내디 아니래다 연가 팁대로 다 자와디 팁샤나 아니 디고라다 어디래다 디직셔나야고요라.
So really, let's give an analogy here. The state of liberation, as we mentioned, is a state beyond these sufferings and dissatisfaction, birth, aging, sickness, and death. Really, what we're going beyond is these afflicted mental states. But if we use the analogy here of a tree, and a tree has a root, and a tree has branches and leaves, and you know, we have these things like desires, attachment, anger, jealousy, these mental constructs. But they're all coming from self-grasping, as you mentioned, this incorrect notion of a self. I. So therefore, if the root of the tree is severed, then the branches, the leaves, and so forth, the flowers become no more. Similarly, here, if we apply a countermeasure to the self-grasping that incorrectly perceives the self, none of the afflicted states that go with that self-grasping can function anymore, will be manifest anymore. So let's give an example. How does incorrect or ignorant self-grasping function? We have this notion of I all the time, isn't it? I. So like my hand, my house, you know, my relatives, my friends, even as far as my faith, my religion, my country, all of these I's. And then over and above that, mine, you know. So first you have grasping at I, and then there's mine. So once you have that, then you start to have attachment to those things. And as a result of attachment to those minds that come from the incorrect I, suffering occurs. So therefore, the next step is to remove the root that stops all of those attachments and clingings to mind. So, how does one remove that root? But if you don't even think on doing that and you just do some yoga and go swimming and you think, oh, I won't think about removing the root of my self-grasping. I'll just go swimming and do some yoga and meditate a bit. Then all you're doing is pruning the tree. You're not removing the root at all. So perhaps we're just doing a lot of pruning, no? What we really have to do is remove the root.
맞아. pruning 지켜봐요라.
It seems we've become so good at pruning.
예.
Yeah, anyway.
어디래? 나도 usted. 나디 먼저 오늘 나디 시고라. 니 개침 보시오지래. 인자 제자 다딘데기 남에도 왜 시럽들라. 안 담행 웃음도 왜 시럽들 람딘체. 또 담행 웃음도 또 요인데 아니 당지 사도 계약 누가 요 말이야. 매번 인자 아니 자와디 정말 까샤로. 자와까베 까과들라 아니 꼭딘체 아니 신도 한다디 초군조서야 되당. 한다디 먼저 남바산지에 군조 숨나니 초군조서야 어디래다. 초군조디 깜거래다. 먼저 짭치 수수수수 짭고 여러면시 지게. 봐. 수수수수 짭고 여러. 수수 동네도 수수 세고 그러면시 지게. 미신다 세니 요마르다스라. 제가 어디래다.
Yes. So therefore, this is a very important point. The cultivating a valid path within one's own mind that is a direct antidote to this ignorance so that this suffering is dispelled. We're talking about the fourth of the four truths, cultivating a true path. Because once you cultivate that valid path of valid path consciousness, directly perceiving reality, then what ceases is self-grasping by the root. When the self-grasping, the erroneous clinging to an inherent self ceases, you get that third of the four truths, the true cessation. And we've talked about this true cessation, this third truth, as being the real Buddha Dharma jewel, and that it is that second Dharma jewel of the truth of Dharma. Now that second Dharma jewel of true cessation is what's affording us the real protection from suffering. This is very personal. One has to cultivate this oneself. It is that.
제자다 디인디 상가로나 산제군조도 추군조 가래라디 산제군조도 cap된 바보 근두군조도 cap되베 따로 추군조도 cap은 제자 산제 수단 근두도 타와도 남지 cap스다 타와스도 코월레 타로 되니도 저기 cap데 아니 산제군조 추군조 근두군조 레스 산제군조도 cap된 바보가 저기 개나시레스로 봐 말랑가 되니드레스 네 근두군조도 cap되베 따로 먼저 추로 조분하시레스
Yes.
So then
right there we have an understanding of the three rare sublime ones, Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. The Buddha jewel, the first, is the teacher on the path, and the second one, the Dhamma, affords that actual protection, the true nature of the mind. And then thirdly, the helpers on the path, the Sangha. So we see how these three are valid objects of direction in terms of a method beyond suffering. And once more, the teacher, the Buddha, shows the path. Secondly, the Dharma jewel is the valid truth in one's own mind, the actual protection. And finally, we have helpers on the path who've already realized that valid protection, the Sangha. Yeah, so really, if one is a Buddhist kind of, in a kind of proper sense, then you're going through that sequence and you're actualizing those jewels.
chashi mangboji business den bugu zemse demen shiro 단단 간주 cha시디다 겨원에 제외기 대화지 project 야치 뭐 쇼로 나란즈도 봐 딩산 비즈니스라고 진이도 개점보로 빼샤라고 돼서 개점 부구신주 zemse 되어나 시르다 그 미유 요 말에 미유디 단도 밀 내가 제거 그러면서 펜토고 요 말. 다 단대 나란즈 This sound susu dila digi tende de digi chung mache. Jime susu theos nana ani mission la rowa che thogo yorwa da khanda wa. Susu dungi le thena mission dungi jab do susu dungi le mate na mission khande jab thogo re ro. O dire da.
What we are going through at the moment, if we engage in business and work in the world, is like child's play compared to, because what we're doing is just like these immediate interactions with others that are, in a sense, afflicted, and they can even harm others. But if you look at the context of what we're trying to do in what we've said about the 3 jewels, is to become completely free of the samsaric state and be liberated. That's a really vast vision. That's like a big long-term view, because here we're going for the great bliss that is beyond the constraints of birth, aging, sickness, and death. It's not just about going into business and working with others on a daily level, which is like children. The point being made is that once you're out of samsara, you can be of great help. How much could you help others if you're out of samsara? Be free from their suffering. We have to help.
That do sometimes do any susu to young and get our susu tanda jidanda on the misamala zawa tego dele, nang on the tanda de to go mara susu. This is Kashi susu pama susu Kashi tobo, Kashi susu bugu, Kashi susu gigan, Kashi susu giru dendela. And it zawa sim kabushibjora.
Yes.
Kawayona. That day. Tindeji go go de go shogbe yala breakfast thewaje lega do chuju singa to and chule du kale khas du che and ya de gonda ma nye ya sanyin lega do ya besha de khangbe build mode build and kanjila de na mengala chin ya besha sangma de zo and ke te mindu thamadela ne teas ke mindu ta de choji gre ne rikjing ne besha kale jab besha mangwe shu just and ne the lawyer jaju dunju jaju gobjiles nana ne million khangbaji gyaro ane million ge modaji nye ane muda million modern nye de modatan sida do thogo marda million khangbaji nala debe na ane khangba jangmaso ni misida je ane ji simde ne ju mindo nga million ya de million je khangba million an de de samba ju mindo koran so ra nga la buda ju mindo sta Kibu said Mendosta, Pesha, million Hangbanan dead there, million modern yade, Simba Mendu Laudora, and Taninger and the Pugra, Puguchin Jam there and Redota, and in the Pesha to the Tagaroji, Milia, Nogdas, Mila Dungate, Mila stressed, Mila tended Pango, the Lang among says you, Dungedi, Dungino message, Pesha de Digini to Togumando, the Puguchin le Dogoda, Puguchin le Dogoda, somewhere Wadana. 제가 아직 당하는 제와 유미도 동에 된데 녀대샤 당에 되게 동에를 태워 지고도 나랑 코를 타는 디그면도 산이 신데 어디에다 전주기 쌤기 유다 이 신병 롤레가 두스 당고 스스로 삼로 당고로 와서 삼로 마다는 미션을 삼로 가고로 코르면더라
So then looking at others, or we often interact with others, we're concerned for loved ones, no? We have this thought that we want to do the best for our parents, our partners, our children. You love them, you want to do the best for them, you want to look out for them. So you might go through your working day, hurry to make your breakfast, get busy, go to work, interact with others. Somehow you have to pay all these bills, do all these normal things, get a car, put petrol in the car, and then get a house and try to be helpful and go get a job and being busy and doing all these things. But then sometimes at the end of the day, we might ask, what have we really got to show from doing all of that? Really? What's that? And then people sometimes so concerned about just making a profit or just making money. And as they get older, they're reaching 70, 80, 90 years. Okay, so they might have gotten that wealth of a millionaire's house or a really nice millionaire's car, or how much can you use that really and live in that really and be happy? Even some of them have servants to come and clean the house. I wonder, I think I've met some of them. I'm not sure if they're all happy. How many millions can you, in fact, use? And in some sense, when we look upon those person, that is almost like a childish approach they're having. So they would almost be an object of great compassion, because to get those results of that nice house and that nice car and so forth, they would have done certain types of karma and had quite a lot of stress around the business, had to work with co-workers and so forth, and created all sorts of karma. So not even in some cases be like a child, be even worse than a child, because a child is quite innocent about the type of karma they create. In this case, that could be quite difficult. Now, okay, so putting all this together, you see that suffering that people are going through, that they might not have a lot to show from their lives, and you wanted to help that. You want to help that. You generate altruism towards that type of suffering situation. But what you can do immediately is quite limited. So that's where you have to come back to yourself. You have to start with yourself and get yourself out of samsara first.
Ta do samdan de susu dunge samdan dunge le tende lo tande lo je tezama se ta susu dunge tawden digmendo rala gadin sinyi ene zawa jingi simje da tamje dunge le tawa chigodo ande nuba ta susu le mendo ro susu le mendo wa da nganzo ne pesha se ne mendo kharishene mendo deleda 다좀바 코월레 타나에 심지 동에 겹투면도 다 산제지 공방사지 유 덴바 산제 공방 톱지 유네 산제 공방 톱된 조다 망고 여러 한다 제가 베나다자도 마셔제도 산제네 로니도 주저두고 여래 될랬다 먼저 도 심지 망고라 탄다에는 펜토고도 그런 최송신决定 먼저를 펜토고도 오다 된대지 땅에 지구도 대시 등에다 다자도 마셔제도 나신지 산제지 공방지 토고도로 심지 신지치 심지 신 동일에 태베치드 내 산제지 공방 뉴도 토고도 삼네 제 교딩이 람냠네레네 삼노단데 네 교쳔베 람냠네도서 나랑슈기 용데기요 따라
Okay. So then thinking on the state of liberation and the demerits of the opposite, which is suffering in samsara, for one's own level, just about what we've talked about would not seem to be enough. There are sentient beings who are still in that state of being suffering, and we have to ask what can help sentient beings go beyond suffering. Certainly, money can't do it. Money is not going to alleviate the suffering of living beings. And if we're honest, where we are at the moment, we can't even do it. Well, what about the bodhisattvas? The bodhisattvas who have great compassion that are out of cyclic existence, they can't even do it. The Buddhas that are out of samsara, they can't even liberate us in that sense. However, if we look at someone like Shakyamuni Buddha, compared to us, 2,600 years ago, he came, and his teachings are still valid today, benefiting beings. So therefore the question comes, how can you help others with their predicament? So just like Shakyamuni Buddha, we can help other sentient beings if we have that great resolve to bring them from out of samsara into that awakened state. So right there, you start to see the border or the connection between the middle capacity, which we talked about, was just the resolve for one's own enlightenment, and the great capacity. How about doing that for all living beings?
심지에 신 동이 대외 치도 디지 타도 디지 타외 치도 아니 산지지 고마 뉴트 토고도 대치도 아니 지다 지조 파진 툴라서고 탑신이라서고 찬주그 셈다 동만이라서고 다 냠렌 친이게 간산들라
So there we start to get the great capacity practitioner's resolve. Of course, first, it's based experientially on seeing the suffering of self, your own predicament, but also induced by seeing that other living beings are in the same state as you. And with that understanding, that induction, you want to place those beings in the state of Buddhahood. Now, placing those beings in the state of Buddhahood is what's called the place of final bliss. Now, in order to be able to do that, you need a method. Okay, so and also your resolve is to do that as quickly as you can. You know, nyurva. You want to do it quickly. So what is the method for that? The method is that you have to train in these perfections, these paramitas. Basically, that means method and wisdom. On the method side of the path, these paramitas, and on the wisdom side of the path, understanding of reality. So you resolve to train in those paramitas to bring beings quickly to that state. Mm-hmm. That's the great capacity practitioner's resolve and mode. Yeah.
만주 도군ye 텐도 토는 도도 그게 전주 심조지와 진줄 라니 시조 시베 솔을 홍 동에 그래서 란주도베 동에디 세야도 지버래 라니 동에 수수 동에 수수 코에 동에래 냐와디 다 티난시니 로심지신 탐제양 뇽되게 요래서 만주 도군ye 텐도 텐데직 토네 게 디다다 동에들레 태와직 지기 대지의 산제고 마토바 지기 사데
Really, then it is from the reference point of self, but with that, seeing that others are in the same predicament, the wish to go for complete and perfect Buddhahood, to alleviate others of that, is the great capacity practitioner's resolve. Lama Tsongkhapa puts it very succinctly when he says, seeing that just like oneself, all other beings have fallen into the cycle of samsara, just like me, they are left behind. So with the resolve to remove them from that suffering and become a Buddha, that is the great capacity practitioner's resolve.
Oh, 들어와. 다 지우 첨보게 람림 지우 총 지우 딩 지우 첨보 되게 거든지 차나다 빼야고 봐. 다 단단하죠. If one gets
a clear understanding of these three capacities of practitioner, small, medium, and great, that is really wonderful. And what we've given is we've kind of briefly given a sensual description of those.
다 수수 냠는데 가와두고도 랑가로 가와두고도 기부 충분 남 냠는 책도 기부 딩 냠는 책도 기부 전문 냠는 책도 다 됐다요.
Right. Now we like to think we are practitioners. Okay. So where is our path going? Are we on the initial scope? Are we practicing medium? Are we going for the great? Where are we?
다음주 단도 취해야 저 치마를 편바지 지기도 최대강하게 동해세야당 수수 로바야고 용야당 수수 깜바니 용야 체디 취치기도 최저를 되기도 아니 당하라는 타베 사면직 토베야 체디 치기도 당에 심진신을 편바두야 시등아 취치기 치기도 다 세부 좋아하는 구노 수수 구노데 랑로랑로 꼬마 유에 인자 수수 삼당고 여러 다 체대강 자야지는 취지다 차고요 말다.
Right, so what are we doing? Are we concerned with future lives or just this life? Are we wanting to stop suffering so much in this life with just an eye to having friends and making a good business? Is that where you are? Or do you have the seed of liberation? Are you planting that? You want to get out of samsara? Or yet again, are you resolute on working for all sentient beings in that? It's up to you. You will know your motive and mind. Yeah, it's motivation, no? It's motivation.
딱 그런 거 차네. 다야 되지 디즈릭도 람지 5만원. 다진 단다 5만원 차래.
Okay.
다 장만원. 다 장대 디버때 달래 지우숨 디버셔. 다 그림만 그림님. 다 디베 개점버려. 그림만 오셔야 돼. 와.
We need to understand that there's a kind of infallible or unerring quality here, and that the paths are unmistaken, the number is correct. But what's most important are that the stages are correct.
다 그림디 간대식으로서는 먼저 기우침배 남냠내시니 기우딩다 기우충 투무에 냠남내치고 그래서나 먼저 미전에 나자와치만 밀루 토버 짬 제나 기우충을 줘래 기우침을 자고 말해 다 저와 나 코벌레 탈베 타바직 토베 짬직 톱자 타바점이 쓰나 기우딩래 기우침을 자고 말해 어디 다 세부신 거래서
So what's clear then is the three capacities, kind of like initial, medium, and great. So let's say if your goal is just to secure a rebirth of higher status of a god or human, that's not great capacity. And if your goal is just to get out of samsara, that's not great capacity, that's medium, isn't it? So the first one we said was just initial. The second one, medium, you should be able to clearly see.
다음도 삼다요래 구름딜래야다 베나딘데 삼다나야고요. 가시에게 주 첨별남년이 주딩다 주 중문에서 남에 다셔로 딘데 마로 남에 다요. 님도 냐네지. 베나 먼저 아니 겨와체와 찍버래로. 저런서 많이 당기에 나래 차체고에 나래 밀레 펜도 지고에 나 겨와 가래나 디고래. 겨와디 가래시디 지고래서나 시도 저 심지 탐제시디 산지지 고만 토고도 오서와 뒤에지도 가 소남사기 인스 아니 산지지 고만 토와 제월라 아니 산지 고만 토와 제월라 아니 가르쳐 그래 코방으로 와 코방war라 아니 코 레타베 타바토고도 스제다 타바토가 제월라 아니 류덴 가래들라 토고래서 미 류덴라 타바토고를 매지 튼류덴 류덴라 타바토고 말해 세상에 시도 저 심지 탐제시 산지 고만 토고 뒤에지도 타바토고도 타바토베시도 아니 미 류덴 토고도 대지등아 겨사기 되나? 다? 숨자대 투무와 람딱다 로송하다.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is these stages being unerring means training in common with all of the scopes together. So in common, having that view to the great capacity, but training in common with the middling and initial scopes as well. Well, how does that work? You might do these things in your Dharma practice. Say manis. So money prayers, prostrate, do your best to help others, whatever. But if one does that with the thought to bring all beings to Buddhahood, the merit from that, and then within that, one has to, in order to get to that state of Buddhahood, one has to reverse cyclic existence and become liberated. And coming back from that again, in order to be liberated, you need a perfect human rebirth as a support. You couldn't go for liberation with an animal body. So right there, then you have the interconnectedness of the three capacities in common with medium and initial scope with the first resolve.
That dinda ni
It's really good from tonight's class if we have a clear understanding of initial, medium, and vast or great scope. Capacity practitioner. There's a question here from online. The notion around daily work and business being child's play really struck home because we do need to work to survive. How do we balance this with real meaningful practice? How do we make this real meaningful practice to get us further along the path? Kishla ditiwa peja haku yupata. Tangazo chachik langanzo sangmala trapa anicheo marwade nganzo lekache gogurwade. Ti yang tundu mayambache chue dang lam nangshin tunda kandis chagore panam penangazo lekadrobe kapla.
최체라 인지민지 다와다 아니 제고 말해라. domdemba de 아니 산제브레 미제된라 산제로. 단다디 최체 결론으로 개념으로
Yes.
제가 좀 더 개념에 네 마블로서와 네 미자레와 주 제일 인지민지 타와다 아니 저 말했어. 인지민지 저 말했어. 타와다 아니 쟤는야 뜻답대요. 그래서 챌린지 뉴어요. 그래서
One doesn't need, of course, to become ordained as a monk or nun to practice the path in earnest. There are stories of great practitioners such as Drom Tompa in Tibet and Mapa, both of whom were householders, lay people, but practiced the path. So that's possible to do. Of course, as a monk or a nun, it's kind of easier.
Traveling time less baggage back you.
Less time.
If you become monk or nun, you go to somewhere, your bag's very simple, very 20 kilos enough. Otherwise, you have so many clothes. Still, you need pay lots extra. Big luggage or clothes. If you become nun or monk, 20 kilos enough. 다들와 추 유응하란저 배나 와 배나하란저 추셔야돼 삼단단지를 두고 요래 제가 군롱기 당기 기부 친구 주섬디 군롱도서 대난신 저란저 내가 가르치게요 되와 저란저 컴퍼니가 내가 지기요나 군롱기 즉 신변지 군롱지 제제 편도지야지도 인스와 아니 다디 컴퍼니디게 내가 집에 대부기 semjen tundula semjen newa jeya mila newa jeya koyu bazol newa jegdona tizirik dozanga zo jabjo mashena ya woyorada
Okay.
인지 민지 그 배셔서라 딜 도가야 뭐라 배셔서야 탑시 담으려 열어라 미리랭원에 딘데 지기나 안 땐데 점블링 구육 봐도 다야도 뉴르 두고래 미리랭원에 나디 내가 죽으면서 내가 마셔는 안 다가와 건서 레미면은 차라 건서 까만에 디게 차라 제가 데 미리랭원에야 나디 데 야우면도 되게 둠데디게네 구육 봐도서도 디 둠데디게 디 배샤도 망고라고도 시네 마음바 미럽 제말은 누구도 알레가데 지금
Okay.
제제는 수수 내가 채워디 내가 가리나 내가 채워디 팬도에 왜지 수수 배샤치도 많이 봐시지 꿀롱 신변 꿀롱 제비나 근데 개월 누구였다 최지야 돼
Really, practicing Dharma comes back to the way we think. Whatever you practice is really the way, your mental attitude, how you think when you do it. So coming back to the motivation, if it's possible, as we mentioned already, with the 3 capacities of practitioner, each of those capacities has a different motive behind it. It's exactly the same when you do one's work. But within that, we have to look at the result. So if there are certain companies that are doing, let's say, inhumane things or harming humans and animals, if your work involves that type of result and those companies are just thinking about the money, then you really need to think individually about what you're doing. Because in reality, there are many ways you can make money without doing those unethical jobs that perhaps are more profit-oriented. So therefore, it shouldn't just come down to the money. Really, when we talk about working and having one's work in line with Dharma, it should be motivation, should be paramount. Yeah, so when the motivation is correct and in line with Dharma, you do your best in that.
수하고 가리나 수바 마그드나 내가 이날에 가와이나 내가 가와이 이날에 와다 지금 사가나라 이날에 총가나라 이날에 안데 랑가서니 이날에 맹가나라 이날에 겐속하나라 이날에 최저가 내가 지니 이날 가리나 수수 내가 뿌타고 야고 지기나 팬도이가 지기 팬도야 그 꿀론데나 내가 될라 누바당 인 기부여와 아니 내가 돼 야고 용으로 내가 돼 야고 용은 밀 팬도으로 왔다 그러
Whatever position or job one does, be it supermarket, restaurant, shop, business, hospital, even working in the Dharma center, if the motivation behind that is good, you'll have a potency or an energy that you're doing it out of altruism. And then, because what we're going for is a good job.
Oh yeah, that didn't they say this better than
Right, so we'll stop today, and if we can recite the text together, slowly together. I bow my head to you, foremost of the Shakyas. This body is formed by 10 million perfections, virtues and excellence, whose speech fulfills the hopes of infinite transmigratory beings, whose mind pervades all objects of refuge. Straight to Manjushri and Maitreya, as emanations sport in innumerable universes, assuming responsibility. You are supreme sons of the fearless teacher. I prostrate at the feet of Nagarjuna and the ornaments of Chandrakirti, renowned throughout all the three rivers, who compose commentaries in accordance with the intention of the conqueror Atisha, holder of the treasury of instructions, gathers together completely unmistakably of the past of the profound view and vast conduct. Excellent lineages descending from the two great charioteers. I prostrate respectfully to the spiritual teachers, eyes that see in the scriptures, who with skillful means moved by compassion, clarify the supreme entryway of fortunate travelling to liberation. The stages of the path of enlightenment, an excellent lineage handed down by Nagarjuna and Sangha, and banners of fame on transmigration. This instruction, the king of powerful jewels, fulfills all the desired aims of the 9 types of beings. It is an ocean of glorious explanations, gathering the rivers of 1,000 fine scriptures. Through it, you can realize that all the teachings are without contradiction. Understand all the scriptures as instruction. Easily find the intention of the conqueror. Be protected from the abyss of very faulty conduct. Therefore, this supreme instruction is relied on by many fortunate ones. The wise beings of Tibet. What analytical person would not be captivated by the stages of the path of the 3 types of beings? Contemplate the meaning of this method that gathers the essence of all the scriptures. Even teaching in a single session definitely gathers great waves of the assembled benefits of explaining or listening to all the Dharma. Rely correctly and with effort in thought and action on the Holy Spiritual Friend, the teacher of the path, and the foundation perfectly bringing auspiciousness for all the excellent collections of this and future lives. Having seen this, do not give them up, even if the possible, and please them with the offering and practice to you, the Guru, practice in this way. I am seeking liberation. Will also practice in this way. This body of leisure, all precious it finishes as quickly as lightning in the sky. Having reflected in this way, realizing that all worldly activities are like water and chaff, you must take its essence day and night. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I am seeking liberation, also practice in this way. Although there is no certainty after death, you will not be reborn into bad migrations. Those 3 rare sublime ones will definitely protect you from this fear. And never degenerate their precepts. In addition, think well about the results of black and white actions and depend on the correct practice to be adopted and that to be rejected. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I am seeking liberation, so practice in this way until you attain a body with pure characteristics. You will not make practice of the supreme power. Train in the courses of becoming free of those impurities. Since your 3 doors are defiled by the negative actions, downfalls, and stains, it is particularly important to purify karmic obscuration. Therefore, continuously cherish your rights and purification.
Dadane chore lanchi simba
You, the
me
perfect
kesam.
Guru, practiced in this
Dadane
way.
chore
I am
lanchi
seeking liberation.
simba me
Also practice in this way.
simba me
If you do
kesam
not
nan
put
je lo
effort
je de
into
me
contemplating true sufferings, the faults of samsara, you will not develop the wish for liberation. If you do not contemplate true origins, steps that enter into samsara, you will not understand how to cut the roots of samsara. Therefore, rely on weariness, definite emergence from samsara, and cherish the knowledge of what binds you to samsara. You, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I am seeking liberation. The generation of the mind is the central post of the mind. The basis of all of great ways of conduct. Transforming all into the collections. The treasure of merit, gathering infinite virtue. Having understood this, the heroic children of the conquerors, mainly the precious supreme mind, you, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Generosity is a wish-fulfilling jewel, satisfying the hopes of transmigratory beings. Cutting the knot of miserliness, the activity of the children of the conquerors that strengthens courage without dismay, and the basis of being renowned within the 10 directions. Understood this, the wise are on the excellent path of giving away their bodies, possessions, and virtue. You, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Morality is water cleansing the stains of faulty behavior, moonlight dispelling the hot afflictions. As splendid as Mount Meru, in the midst of the 9 types of beings, it gathers all transmigratory beings with no thread of force. Having understood this, holy beings guard morality correctly as they do their eyes. You, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Patience is the finest ornament, the powerful, the supreme of all hardships, countering the torment of the afflictions, a Garuda against the enemy, the snake of hatred, a thick armor against the weapon of harsh speech. Having understood, cultivate the armor of supreme patience in many ways. You, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. When you don armor like effort, steady and immovable, the qualities of scripture and realization will increase like the waxing moon. All your behavior becomes meaningful, and whatever actions are undertaken, accomplished as desired. Having understood this, the conqueror's children put forth billowing waves of effort, dispelling all laziness. You, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Concentration is like a king ruling the mind. When placed, it is immovable as Mount Meru. When set forth, it engages all virtuous objects. It induces the great bliss of a serviceable body and mind. Having understood this, the Lord of Yogis rely continuously on meditative stabilization that destroys the enemy distraction. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Wisdom is an eye seeing profound thusness, the path eradicating the roots of existence, a treasury of qualities praised in all the scriptures, and renowned as supreme of the lamps dispelling the darkness of ignorance. Having understood this, the wise who desire liberation generate the path with much effort. You, the perfect Guru, practiced in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. One-pointed concentration alone is not considered to cut the roots of samsara. Wisdom separated from the path of karma abiding will not avert the afflictions, no matter how much you analyze. Having mounted the wisdom that reflects on the real mode of existence upon the horse of steadfast karma abiding, with a sharp weapon of the logic of the middle way, free of extremes, destroy all mental fabrications grasping at extremes. With vast wisdom analyzing in this way, increase the wisdom that realizes suchness. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. The meditative stabilization achieved by one pointed meditation is not enough. With the individual investigation of proper analysis, generate the meditative stabilization that abides firm and immovable on the mode of existence. Understanding how wonderful are those who endure. To accomplish the union of calm abiding and special insight, you, the perfect Guru, practice in this way.
I, who am seeking liberation,
Will also practice in this way. In meditative equipoise, emptiness is like space. In post-meditation, emptiness is like an illusion. Through meditation on both method and wisdom are unified, whereby the perfect conduct of the conqueror's children is praised. Having realized this, the tradition of those of good fortune is not satisfied by either path alone. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Having generated the common path necessary for the two supreme Mahayana paths, the causal and resultant, rely on a protector, a skillful master, and enter into the great ocean of the classes of Tantra. Then, through reliance on complete and perfect instructions, make the attainment of your leisures and endowments meaningful. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way. I, who am seeking liberation, will also practice in this way. Due to the virtue from explaining in clear words the perfect complete path pleasing to the conquerors, so as to familiarizing and to benefit others of good fortune, I made the prayer, may all transmigratory beings never be parted from the excellent pure path. You, the perfect Guru, practice in this way.
I, who am seeking liberation, will also
Practice in this way.
Yeah, I'm stop.
Page 31 for the short mandala. Sashi. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniriyachaya. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, rejoicing and requesting that by the victorious ones thus gone. May the omens of obstacles be complete. The wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech.